know how to use one of these?
Goldeneye. Load a rumble pack and see how it feels when 007 meets N64.
Well, we usually have a pretty long spiel at the beginning of our episodes. I usually talk everyone's ear off with the, development of these games and how they were created and everything. But instead, this time we were lucky enough to have, I would say, an expert on the show. I would say if there's anybody to talk about GoldenEye 007 on this console, it's going to be Alyse Knorr, the author of the Boss Books book about GoldenEye, about its development, about everything around GoldenEye. Alyse, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with y'all.
I'm so excited because not only is GoldenEye obviously a very big game when it comes to the N64 and really just the 90s and this generation of games, but to be able to talk about someone who did so much work in order to make this book and talk to so many people that helped develop it and everything. It's really exciting. Jiggy, man, like, I don't know. I can go for the next 10 minutes being like, I'm excited, but I'm assuming we're in the same boat.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm here, by the way.
Yes, and you're here as well. So Alyse, let's talk a little bit about. I want to ask you about how you came to writing a book like this, because we were sort of joking before we hit record that me and Jiggy are experts at the N64 games, which I think we're just going to own it. We're going to run with it. But we're giving you. Yeah, exactly. We're giving you the expert title on GoldenEye 007. And, a lot of people can sit here and be like, I played this game or any other game over and over and over as a kid. But it's different when you've dug into the history and all that. But how do you get to even get to this point of writing a book like this?
Well, so I've always been a big fan of games. I played my first game before I could read or write. My dad sat me down in front of Super Mario Brothers 3 and Doom and Myst and Day of the Tentacle when I was tiny. So I grew up with games. I've always loved games.
Can I stop you right there to ask something?
Yeah, please. Yes.
What was your first video game?
Ooh.
It was Super Mario 3.
It was Super Mario.
That was my very first
What a
one.
glorious way to start. Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh, excellent. Also excellent.
If we're all sharing,
what was your first
mine is not
a
a standout title because I didn't get a console until, the first one that I think I owned and I played rather than watching someone play, let's say Super Mario 3 or something like that, was this old F1 racing game that was on our PC that you would just control with the arrow keys, or maybe it was Indy. It probably was Indy.
Arrow keys.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Imagine controlling a game with arrow keys. Forward was gas and the back button was brake. It was that kind of thing. Literally, you just used four keys. And it almost looked like this, wireframe representation of the cars, and it was only sat in the seat. I think it's just called Indy 500. That's all it's called. I don't know how we had it because my parents do not play games, never have, so I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was just pre-installed on whatever little PC we had. I don't know, whatever. It's the first one I remember that I actually sat there and played is probably that. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Sorry for interrupting. I just was really curious.
No, I love that. Yeah, I love it. Please interrupt. So I always loved games. I went to college and studied creative writing and journalism. I became a English professor. I was living up in Alaska, starting to get into my late 20s, feeling a little nostalgic about the games I grew up playing. And I saw a call from Boss Fight Books for proposals about video game for books about video games. They release one standalone titles about individual games. And I was thinking mostly I write poetry, but it would be really fun to apply those journalism skills to write a book that says documentary work and memoir work combined on a video game. So I wrote a book about Super Mario 3 since that was my original favorite game of all time. And then a few years later, I was got the itch again to do some more video game writing, and I pitched the editor Gabe a book about Goldeneye. So sort of drawing together my video game fandom, my love of writing memoir and creative work, and also wanting to put those journalism skills to good use and keep those fresh with interviews and research and documentary style writing.
That's awesome. I will say too, I don't know if you have any involvement, or any of the authors have any involvement in like what even like the books look like. But the Super Mario Brothers 3 one literally has a real raccoon just on the front of it, which is just fantastic. And then the artistry that kind of goes into I guess there's two editions of the Goldeneye one. There's a regular, and then there's a deluxe, and the look of them are both very cool. Like it's very simple art, but I just want to point out that if anyone looks it up, I find them very charming. All three of those. So
thanks.
Yeah, they did a very cool job with that too.
The sort of, I think the first few seasons that he does them in seasons, Gabe, during the editor of Boss Fight, the first few seasons of Boss Fight books, the covers all have a real life representation of something that's, graphically rendered in the game. So in my case for Mario, it's the raccoon, but there are plenty of other really great and hilarious examples of sort of like real life animals or objects on those covers. And lately he's been going for a more stylized, which I think looks equally great, sort of more graphical looking art. And in the case of the hardcover of my book, something that was hand drawn by our wonderful cover designer.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like even like the real life ones, like the Resident Evil one is as a typewriter. Like that's great. I love that.
Yes,
like that's really fun. And like a really old school typewriter too. Like it looks like it's from like the 30s or something. So that's awesome. And
the paperback, I should just say in case people can't see it, the paperback of Goldeneye, I just think it's the funniest thing. It's a guy in a bowler hat with his back to you and a little crosshairs right above his head. So it's supposed to be odd job. He's like just too short for your. So that just cracked me up that we were able to do that. I was like, this is everything I always dreamed of.
They definitely know what they're doing.
When you know, right? Like if you know.
Exactly. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. Let's talk about the game. You mentioned obviously you've been playing games your whole life. Let's talk about like the 64. For certain consoles kind of hit people at a certain age and they just sort of stick with them, right? And the 64 has this great, like, nostalgic feel of getting people together from, I would say that the standout games, unless it's, Zelda or even Mario 64, like, you could swap controllers and all that kind of stuff. But, sitting down playing Mario Party, or sitting down playing this game. What was your experience with the 64 as you grew up?
It came out when I was 9, and this was a perfect age because I had grown up on the NES and Super NES and fallen in love with games like Mario and Donkey Kong, and I loved adventure games and platforming games. And so when the N64 came out, I was sort of maturing into those more complicated games like Mario 64, Star Fox 64, Shadows of the Empire, and of course Goldeneye. And then going into, middle school and high school, and then even on into college, it was just the perfect, Goldeneye in particular, the perfect game to play with your friends, to play at sleepovers. Of course, we've all had these wonderful experiences of playing with our best friends and our siblings. In my case, my college boyfriend and his roommate and my roommate. It was just such a great party game. And I think the N64 in general, really facilitated that. We also played a lot of Mario Kart, a lot of Super Smash Brothers. And it's just, actually I have some friends from out of town, from North Carolina right now in my house. And last night, the four of us, we're all in our 30s and 40s, gathered around my old N64, sitting on the floor, and played Goldeneye, slappers only. And we were just laughing so hard. My wife, won. She's never beat a video game in her life, and she beat all of us in slappers only. So I do think the N64 is, as you talk about on your show a lot, it's the ultimate party friendship console.
Okay. Just going off that. So multiplayer, were you good?
No.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. No.
I have to ask because I suck.
No, it's very hard. I think that I was always the one sort of launching grenades and then blowing myself up by them or walking into my own mines. I was decent. I would never be last, but I would definitely never be first.
Yeah.
And
That's why
that's true for all the games.
I'd always try to gear multiplayer things back to Smash Bros because I could dominate in Smash Bros. But
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
you gotta have variety. But I like to win.
Totally. I mean, I've never been a super. I talk about this in the Super Mario book, but like, I've never been a super competitive person around like beating other people. Like, that's never been a thing that gives me a lot of joy. I am very self-competitive, so anything that's going to be like those timed missions in Goldeneye or the single player campaign, like wanting to level up past agent to 00 agent or double 007 and all those extra objectives. Like I like long distance running and not sports with balls and points. Like it's always just kind of like about endurance and completion for me. So I did really love the single player campaign too.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, and these are it's some of the notes that I wrote down as I was reading the book too, where it really is the single player is. We'll get more into. We'll probably be jumping all over this game and stuff because there's just so much to talk about, and like I said, you're here, so we're going to talk about everything we can. The single player is something that, for whatever reason, when I was saying, like, even telling myself when I started the show that, when we get to GoldenEye, I have this distinct feeling that I'm going to have this nostalgia more for the single player than I do even for the multiplayer. Not that obviously everybody seemed around this time to be playing multiplayer on this, whether it's 2, 3, or 4 people, but the sort of create your own fun type of thing that is like a really big thing you can do in open world games now, or even other FPS games that have come out since then. Like Halo is a prime example of games like that, I think, because of the mechanics. And this is one of those games, but it's clear that in the book, as you're, writing about all the experiences and how these guys made this game and how Rare made the game, that's exactly what they wanted. In some ways, I think I grew up thinking like, oh, we're breaking the game, quote unquote, breaking the game, or, oh, we're just messing around with the mechanics. And they didn't really want us to do that with the mines, or they didn't really want us to do that with the rockets or whatever. But that is what they wanted. And it seems like they just left things in there to have fun with. And they left things in there that were goofy, like things that we thought were funny, they thought were funny. And that's why they were in there. And I love that.
Absolutely. They were so motivated by fun. I mean, it was 8 guys, only 2 of whom had ever worked on a game before. So they were all these rookies.
So crazy.
They were just going based on what they loved. And they were playing games with each other the whole time. They were playing Super Bomberman and Doom. And so they lived and really worked in an environment of play all the time, and they play tested everything with each other just to see if it was fun. So that really comes through, and they talk about how there are these sandbox elements of GoldenEye that some of them are intentional, some of them are unintentional messiness that they left in, whether it's sort of like, little things that you just notice that are little Easter eggs that are super fun, or the ability to like shoot a soldier's hat off of his head and the hats can start stacking and you can do weird things and juggle hats, and like the kind of multiple routes through a level, multiple ways to beat a level, all of that kind of like lo-fi open world concept was super influential on the game being as fun to choose your own path as it was.
Yeah, one of the things that I remembered as I was reading was, and as I picked up the game again, was everything explodes. Like everything.
Yes. Everything. Everything.
The chair.
You shoot a chair.
Yes.
It's just, oh, okay. And some stuff it makes sense. So, sure, the computer's going to blow up.
You want to know what I picked up right away? I was like, oh, I remember this, drawing pictures on the wall with the bullet holes.
Yes. And I was like, you can write your name.
I wasn't writing my name. I definitely drew a penis, and it definitely was like a thing that, like, immediately I'm like, just, you have to do it. It was like, oh, this takes me back.
You absolutely have to.
Yeah. It should have been like a cheat code or something. Could have got you. Could have got you one of the cheats.
Yes. It gives you a special gun. That'd be funny.
You remember the prison level that you start in? There's definitely like urine stains on the wall. You can see it. Like they've drawn that into the art. And they were very prurient themselves. There's quite a few things in there that are like naughty schoolboy humor, as they call it. Like the DD Dostovi pistol was named after Double D bra size. Slappers only is actually slapper is a reference to prostitutes. It's a British slang term for prostitutes. And then that line where Moneypenny in the pre-mission briefing says, she says like, be careful with that chopper, James. And she's
Right.
referring to the helicopter. I never got that joke as a kid, but it's because I guess in England, chopper is slang for penis.
Yeah, I think
So they had all kinds of.
I rewatched the movie. I think there's a line very similar to that because they sort of do a back and forth in the one scene that they're together. There's something similar to that. Yeah, but that's the other thing too, right? It's very easy as a kid to just skip over those like mission briefings, but they're written really cleverly.
Yeah.
You know, like
They're great.
there's some stuff like that. I easily would have missed that. I don't know. A chopper. I knew a chopper was a helicopter. That's what I even now, honestly, until I read that in your book, I never would have made that connection.
It's very British. I mean, I didn't get it, but they put all kinds of really, really silly little things like that in there. And they, a lot of the time they were literally, they told me in interviews, just trying to see what they could get away with. And sometimes, like in the case of David Doak, including himself as a character in the game, they were told no. The developers told them, or even just the inclusion of a multiplayer option. Their bosses at Rare said, absolutely not. You may not do this. And then they just did it anyway.
I love that. So just like looking at the beginning of your book, talking about the history of Rare, the history of the game, you know, I love that they didn't want to touch a James Bond. Like they were like, no, we don't want to do a licensed game. You know, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, that's instant money grab because you get auto recognition. But they were like, no, it's not original. Like it's not something we want to mess with. And I'm like, that's so interesting to me.
Yeah.
I think they were, you know, it was Rare kind of at the height of their powers, and they were getting cocky, and they were, you know, for good reason. They were making beautiful games, and they were really really interested in aiming high and only taking on really high prestige projects. And so they, you know, that's how they ended up giving the project to these rookies, because they were like, "Well, I guess this will just be something for the new guys to cut their teeth on. It's not going to matter. It's a movie license game. That's like a kiss of death as far as you know, quality. Those games are always so bad. And
honestly, that's still a stain that sticks around, right? In a way, it really doesn't. It's not. I don't think it's as evident as maybe it used to be, but. Fair enough. I mean, I feel like I would question it too if I was them.
We say this, and then I just like I remember that stigma of movie tie-in games, and I remember there were a lot of them, but I also remember a lot of good ones that were so much fun. Spider-Man 2 comes to my head. I was like, that game was so much fun.
I was going to bring that one up.
Yep. I like there were a couple Matrix games that were really fun. There was just like it wasn't it. You know, it's a stigma because the bad ones that were bad were really bad. But there were gems out there. Like, you ever played The Incredibles? I know that's a little more obscure.
No, I haven't.
Disney Pixar's The Incredibles slaps.
Oh my gosh, I have to try it. I did play Peppa Pig on the Xbox with my 4-year-old the other day, and it did not slap. It did not slap for me, but it slapped for her. And that's what matters.
Yeah, that's what matters.
Well, next up is apparently a Bluey game too, and Bluey's, you know,
that's great.
So that could be kind of cool. Bluey's fun. Yeah. I don't even have kids, and I've watched a few episodes. I'm like, this show's amazing.
Bluey's fabulous. Bluey's a show for any age. I'm convinced.
It really is.
I'll play that game.
The bite-sized episodes, everything. It's great. It's excellent.
So sweet. So sweet.
Also, to the in the development of everything too, which I didn't know this at all. So I was just like checking off boxes of I've learned something today. You know, one of those things. Every time I got to a new couple pages of your book, I was like, I didn't know that. And I have all these like
great
pins in it. I was like, this is amazing. That this was originally similar to what Virtua Cop was, which is constantly brought up in the development, that this was an on rails shooter at first, which I had no idea. I guess it makes sense based on technology and time and everything, but like, I just can't even imagine that being this game or even a game like that on the 64 at that time. It feels like it was like that for so long in development too, which is so crazy to me.
Totally. Yeah, it was real. This was the one thing about the development process that I got really mixed answers from the guys about. They really had trouble remembering when it came off the rails. Some of them said, we always wanted to put it off the rails. And others said, you know, we didn't decide for sure that we were going to take it off the rails until after Super Mario 64 came out and we saw how fun an open world was on the N64. I mean, part of the problem is they didn't have an N64 for the vast majority of the development process. They didn't have the controller. They didn't know what was possible. They didn't know what the console was really going to be able to do. But yeah, they were so committed to the Virtual Cop model that they would go to the arcade and bring big bags of coins and sort of sit there and feed the machine coins and really learn Virtua Cop. One of the first artist hired on the game, Carl Hilton, was giving some advice to his friend Brett Jones when Brett was applying to be the second artist on the game. And Brett Jones had never played a video game before. He was a real talented artist, and he knew a lot about James Bond. He was a huge James Bond nerd, but he didn't play video games. So Carl Hilton told him, listen, in your interview, just make sure you talk a lot about Virtua Cop. It's really important to Martin. And Brett did, and got the job. So there's I mean, I mentioned this in the book, but there's footage of it on the rails still all the way up through, I mean, like within maybe 6 to 9 months of it coming out.
I think I wrote down that it was so last minute. It was E3 96. You wrote in the book that it was still technically on rails, and that's when Mario 64 and GoldenEye were shown, and it's
just crazy.
I don't like,
and there's still definitely levels that show that influence, right? So like the train level really feels like a Rails level. It's very linear, you know, you're just
tight,
shooting guys as they pop out. But the fact that then you can also have levels you get lost in, you know, maze-like levels or levels where you can really have a different strategy approach depending on, I mean, it made the game, the fact that it's open world. And so, huge decision.
Yeah, I can't believe that. I can't believe it. I just can't. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
What blows my mind is the fact that they didn't have a dev kit. They didn't have any. I remember reading that. I'm like, nothing? Like,
no, nothing.
How do you design something for something you have no idea how it's like?
I know.
That's wild.
I know. Yeah, it's wild, and it definitely led to a lot of challenges in their process. Whether it was the musicians trying at the last minute to, you know, basically they were told the N64 could do a lot more than it ended up being able to do. So that meant the artists were screwed on, you know, the size of some of their images and files. They had to do a lot of work compressing and cutting and shrinking things. Same thing with the musicians. And I do think that, you know, the thing about the N64 controller is that, you know, it's I guess according to legend, the controller was really designed for Mario 64. It's a controller that plays really well for that game. But then the GoldenEye guys, you know, it's a horrendously sort of horrible controller for a first-person shooter. However, if you play with one controller in each hand and you know, you have one control stick for aiming and one for moving, it technically is the first dual analog control stick shooter.
Right, which is also I honestly, I don't know how long have you know, nerds like me or us been on the internet. I did not know that was a thing until I think less than a year ago. I had no idea.
So crazy, so awkward. And I feel like now that the game has been re-released for Xbox and Switch, which it wasn't at the time that my book came out. There were rumors about it, right? But it hadn't happened. Now, you know, I don't know about you guys if you've played it on those consoles, but I cannot get used to it. I cannot get used to doing GoldenEye with dual analog. I kind of hate it.
I have my Xbox controller still sitting beside me because I opened it back up and played like the first 2 stages again.
Cool. How did it go
today? So I have the cartridge, I have a Switch, and I have it on Xbox because I have Game Pass. So I dabbled in all of them, but I think I'm just too tailored to playing with dual sticks now. So
really,
yeah. So I think, you know, I'm kind of I'm talking about this game that's 25 plus years old, and yet here I am playing it with an Xbox and an Xbox controller. I think for me, my mind now works where I have a separate joystick to constantly look around, as opposed to, you know, not relying on auto aim, but auto aim is obviously something that is big in the original and on the Switch as well. It works almost exactly the same. And having to press R and look around and stuff is fine because you don't always have to do it.
Yeah.
But I found I was like looking, like I was doing this and I was walking in weird directions and stuff, which is
really
similar.
Hard.
Yeah, it just feels a little bit awkward, and I don't know if that's because that's the way it always was, but I don't remember it feeling that way. But it's interesting because me and Jiggy just played Jet Force Gemini, and it works almost exactly the same, except that's technically third person. Yeah,
and that's where I was going to go with this. So I started playing the Switch version and set it up for dual stick in it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm playing dual stick, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. But because we played Jet Force Gemini, and I went back to this, so I initially like my replay since the last time I played it, which who knows how many years it's been.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
I was like, first replay, dual stick, more modern controls. And then I went back to the 64 and I'm like, this feels really good. Like I was almost surprised at how much I enjoyed playing it on the 64. I'm like, this works really well. And
It's so true. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm the same. I mean, I love having a dual control stick for everything modern, but for whatever reason, my like GoldenEye muscle memories are tied to the N64 controller, and I don't know how to function if I'm firing with my right finger instead of my left finger. And but yeah, that R button aim was such a pain in the ass because you did have to do it on the higher difficulty levels. The auto aim was less intense, and so, or in multiplayer, you know, it's really helpful to use that R, but it is terrible. And especially if your control stick, if your N64 controller is like a little old and the control stick is a little sticky, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, because it's true when you're aiming at the cameras or the turrets on the ceiling and stuff. There's no auto aim with those, none. So those
and
levels,
it's not super subtle.
No, and it's not. Yeah, and those turrets are relentless. They can find you from a couple of pixels. You know, like they just beat the crap out of you. I was like, are you kidding? I thought I was good at this game.
Totally. Destroying those cameras is one of the tensest moments for me because, like, as soon as it, you know, as soon as it sees you, you're screwed. But it takes forever to aim with the stupid thing, and so it's very complicated.
I found and not to jump ahead into levels, but the jungle level with the drones that come out of the ground, they're like hiding in the bushes.
Brutal.
I'm like, mother grabber! I was getting mad.
Yeah, it's just brutal. It really is, and I still struggle on that level every time.
Yeah, when I played that, I was like, oh, I honestly I only sort of forgot about some of the levels because, like I mentioned earlier, with the like sort of, you know, make your own fun type of thing. It seems like a lot of people like repeated same levels, whether it was Dam or whether it was, you know, whatever. Usually Jungle wasn't one of those. I think maybe because it was just like turrets and then what you could call a boss fight, right? Essentially. And there's just less experimentation with that. There's less, how about this? There's less tables and chairs to blow up. So there's, you know, like there's less reason to fill a room with mines, I guess.
It's true. Those levels are especially interesting for me to watch. One of my favorite run-throughs to watch is the beating Goldeneye with like only one bullet. Because you can do it. Some people have done it. And the only bullet you need actually is to shoot the lock off the gate in Dam.
Oh.
Everything else that you can do. And it's incredible, especially on levels like that, because you're thinking, how are you going to get through? How can you do a defense only approach and cross the bridge past Xenia? How can you get past those turrets that are so much less forgiving than the guards that you can kind of sneak past because they're stupid and slow.
Yeah. Purposely stupid, which I don't mind. That's totally fine. That's why you can shoot their hat off. That's why you can just, you know, just shoot them in the butt and like, you know, the little animations that they have and everything. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that stuff. That level actually, the jungle was actually kind of cool when I went back to it. It was like, oh, this, you know, you mentioned the music earlier and like the music in this, you know, when it's a licensed game or when it's such a recognizable property, especially a Bond theme, and based on a movie that came out years before, they did a great job of the music, and somehow this is one of those games where like the fog of war works in this level because you're in a misty jungle or whatever, and I was like, ooh. I feel this level. I like it. I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would, or more than I remember enjoying anyway.
Right. You got that kind of Turok effect in the jungle, but it definitely makes sense. It's earned. They were, you know, one of the things the developers were always so self-conscious about when I talked to them was the frame rate, and the fog and the things they were doing to kind of cover some of those issues. They're still very embarrassed about it. And I was just like, guys, like it was 1996. Like, what are you going to do? I mean, you did beautiful work, and they're so British. They just refuse any compliments. They absolutely hated being complimented by me. And I was like, I have to compliment you. I'm writing a book about how beautiful your game is. And they would just like wince every time I said something nice. And no.
Well,
The most humble, humblest, sweetest guys.
Yeah, it comes through in the book for sure.
Good.
But Jiggy, you were mentioning to me, I think when we were talking about playing it like last week or something like that, you said that you ran into some of the frame rate stuff, but none of it bothered me. I don't know. Did it cause any problems for you or?
Okay, so yes.
Okay.
Like, and I have a very high tolerance for frame rate dipping. Like,
Yeah, me
and
too.
like my favorite game of all time is Banjo-Tooie, and the frame rate is locked at a solid 24, and it often dips below that. So
Yeah.
I'm like
Yeah.
really accustomed. But I'm trying to think. It's one of the beginning levels where you have to go. Like, it's right when you meet Trevlin for the first time. It's that level, and
Oh,
like
yeah.
the gas canisters and everything.
Yep.
So in there, I triggered an alarm, and then you get like, I don't know how many guys coming at you. Like, they just load, like, to the point where
Yeah.
your game is like like stuttering, right? And I'm trying to power through it. I'm just firing. My game froze, and this happened not
Oh.
once
Oof.
but twice for me. And I was
That's not good.
mad because it's like, it's not at the beginning, it's not at the end. It's like
Yeah.
midway through the mission, and I just have to start over. So,
Yeah, and
Yeah,
when all that
that's
stuff's
rough.
blowing up and everything, I think when all the explosions went off is sort of when I noticed it. I think that might have been one of the stages, but like, I don't know. I mean, I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna kill everybody, and get out of here. Like, I just sort of did it quick, and it was
it
fine.
didn't
Like,
Yeah.
it didn't stop me. I
yeah,
still kept
exactly.
playing. I was just like, ah. It's not like
Yeah.
collecting a bunch of tribals to complete the game, Jet Force
Oh my
Gemini.
god. Oh my god. No, it's definitely not that. Thank God.
It's way worse. I mean, it is way worse on the multiplayer. I think when you
Hmm.
have four, because we had this happen the other night when I was playing with my buddies. When you have four separate screens and they all have explosions going in grenade mode, it's just terrible.
Yeah,
It
Yeah.
I
slows
can
down to
imagine.
like 10, and you're like, okay, I can't. But I did think it was way worse. As a whole, I think the frame rate issue was way worse in Perfect Dark than in Goldeneye, which is one of the biggest reasons I never could get into Perfect Dark. I just
Yeah, I
it
remember
frustrated
that being the case, but I don't have a ton of experience with Perfect Dark, but I do remember that being the thing. But it's like also
Yeah.
this and a lot of games that came out around this time. I was like, well, if you had that expansion pack, it would have really boosted things or whatever.
Good
But
point.
it wasn't out yet. They didn't know it was coming probably at that
Right.
point. Like all of that stuff. In
Yeah.
a similar way, I find it. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little maybe you look this up, maybe you have a note on it at least, but
Yeah.
so the entire game was 12 megabytes. The entire game.
Yes.
That's first of all insane that it's just that size.
Right.
You wrote the way you describe it in the book is, and I'm going to preface it by saying kids these days might not know what 12 megabytes is.
Right.
How-
Yeah. It's
yeah.
true.
How many copies of this game could fit in a 64 gigabyte cell phone? Do you remember what that number is?
I'm looking in my own book because I forgot. It's something
Okay,
crazy. I know
It
that.
is 5,333. That is only 64
Wow.
gigs, which at this point, sitting in the middle of 2023,
Oh my
is
lord.
is very easy to get. 64 is almost nothing at this point, right? I just and then it goes back to your point of being like, yeah, so what if there's a little bit of slowdown? Look what you had to work
Right.
with.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
It's
And
these
I
guys
mean,
were masters.
one of the-
They were
yeah.
masters. Like,
They
This is
did.
one of the themes that came up in talking to the GoldenEye guys and the Super Mario Brothers 3 people was that these designers really they miss this period when you could design a AAA title on a team of under a dozen people working really, really closely, and where the constraints led to creativity, and the constraints was a fun obstacle for them that made them come up with their best ideas. And now they sort of sound a little cynical about the fact that most textures in modern games are far larger than 12 megabytes, and but everything got bigger, and so teams got bigger for these AAA games. The teams got bigger. You may never know all the people working on the game with you, and so they definitely kind of refer to this as like a golden era of game design for them.
Yeah, well, I can imagine even some of the pictures that are in your book about just a small little office of them
Yeah.
just working around these tiny little computers and having TVs, and just books and
Yeah.
resources and things just everywhere. It's like, it feels like they were on their own little college campus, like that's really what it looked like. And each like team, which like you said, under a dozen people, probably on
Yeah.
average around that, rare campus could fit within a couple rooms. And that's where this game was made. It's just,
so
Absolutely. Yeah.
that aspect of it, like what you said is almost verbatim something I heard Aonuma, who is the director of Zelda and Tears of the Kingdom that just came out on Switch. He was talking about how he appreciates that whenever people bring up like, oh, Nintendo hardware's so like last gen, it's out of date, it doesn't have enough. He said that exact thing. He's like, I love when we're limited by that, because that's when we get creative. That's when we come up with new concepts to utilize those limitations in a way that makes a fun gameplay style,
Right.
And there is definitely truth to that.
Yeah, as a writer, I use this concept in teaching writing all the time. You need the constraint of a sonnet to write a beautiful poem because it forces you to be concise, to be careful, to be intentional. It forces you to think of not the very first word that comes into mind, but the one that will rhyme with the word that you need. All of those constraints, are super important for creativity. And they're what creates fun in the process. So games are fun because they have rules. Games are fun because they constrain you. When you're outside with your friends and you're like, what should we do? And it's like, I don't know. Like, it's not fun. But when you're like, let's play this game and there are rules involved, that's what creates fun. So it's super interesting. It's a very Japanese idea too. And I guess a British one too, that smallness and tightness and miniatures, are especially exciting. But I definitely, both in terms of how close they felt as a small team and in terms of how they felt creatively inspired by their constraints, it was amazing to me to hear how nostalgic these guys were about their experiences making the game. Because of course I'm writing this book because I feel so nostalgic about playing the game.
Right. Which is wild. It's yeah, well, yeah, I know, right? Is that why I'm doing this? Probably. That's why we have it, right? So,
I love that, and I love the fact that that it's 12 megabytes, right? That's the size. Because I had to look it up because I'm like, okay, rare. Like I know Conquer was more. Conquer, repping Conquer. I knew Conquer was more. I just wanted to talk about my shirt. That's why I'm bringing this up. Conquer was like the end of the 64 life, the end of that era. And I was like, I wonder what that cartridge size kind of got to. And it said Conquer maxed out at 64 megabytes. So you think even that, I remember having a flash drive that was, I don't know, 256 megabytes back in the day. And I'm like, those, like all that content squeezed into that small little package, but 12 megabytes is even more impressive. Like Goldeneye's not short. It's a decent sized game.
Yeah.
Like
that's the thing.
Yeah.
I was going through it, and kind of like what you mentioned earlier, Alyse, where you said like, oh, you want to sort of have those goals for yourself where you're conquering the different difficulties, for example, like playing it in single player and stuff. Yeah, where you're conquering that'd be a cool mashup. And I started on the regular difficulty. I don't remember offhand exactly what it was. I think it's just Secret Agent, I think. And I ran into a little bit of a wall in the difficulty, and I want to find exactly what stage it was. I think it was one of the last ones, maybe Caverns or Control. I think maybe.
Control is very
Control.
Okay, so it's not just me.
No.
Okay, that's where she has to she has to go. She's on the computer, and you have to kind of save her or keep her alive or whatever. Yeah, I don't know how many times
incredibly frustrating.
She was killed, and I'm like, I can't do this. I can't. What am I supposed to do? Like jump in front of a bullet? I don't even know that's there. Like, how am I supposed to do this? So
sometimes
I did that.
You do, yeah.
Well, that's what I ended up doing. I just, instead of standing by the stairs where the guys were coming down and stuff, I just ended up standing. I took the hits. I stood in like on either side of her. I just went left to right and just did a half circle around her while she was, doing her fist smacking of the keyboard. And Yeah. Actually, the funniest thing of the animation is, yes, there's lots of animations that they had fun with the guards and everything. When you shoot them in the groin, you shoot them in the butt, you hit their hat, their arm, their leg. All that stuff is amazing. The funniest thing to me is when she's typing sometimes. When any character's typing sometimes when they type, because they don't have fingers, they couldn't really pull that off, which is fair enough. It's just what it is. She kind of like flips her wrist up. She's typing. She just goes up like this, as if she's like giving the computer the finger, but they can't animate the middle finger. That's what it looks like. It's almost like she's going.
That's such a great catch. I hadn't thought about that, but you're totally right.
Bond, you saved me. You did such a great job. And then it looks like she's going, you know what? Fuck you. Like, that's what it looks like she was doing.
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
So that stage got me. And then I bumped the difficulty down one notch. And then I forgot that if you don't beat it in one difficulty, you can't continue on the next level on that other difficulty.
Right.
So I was like, do I have to go back and do this? And
that's
then
where I did it, and the easiest mode possible.
There you go. Yes. It gets incredibly difficult in those later levels, especially once you. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, even the difference between Damn on Agent and Damn on 007 is pretty extraordinary. Like,
and that's just the start. That's the first stage.
I couldn't do it. I mean, I can still beat Super Mario Brothers 3. No problem. Like with warp whistles, give me 10 minutes, I'll beat the game. But Goldeneye, when I was replaying it to write this book, I couldn't beat it on 007. I couldn't finish it. I got to controls and I couldn't pass that. It was just too hard.
All right, so it's not okay. No joke. Okay, you guys are making me feel better. It's not just me. It was that stage and it was that. Yeah. Okay. All right, cool.
It's all okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we need to talk about. As long as I feel better about myself, that's it.
Ego boost, full ego boost.
All right, great, amazing. Do you have, Alyse, do you have a standout level that you remember either replaying or one that when you replayed, you're like, oh, that's the one that I really appreciate? Like, I know those might be two different things, but if there isn't, we can go first and whatever. But yeah, I just thought I would jump into that.
I actually like Control a lot because I write about this in my Mario book, but I have complicated feelings about like damsels in distress because I know that they can be, a little bit regressive and all of that. And I want women to be saving men and saving other women. And I want all of that. But I also, I am a lesbian. And so I like a good like damsel to take care of and to protect and to do this chivalrous, like taking bullets for her, just like you explained. So that level's a bit of a thrill, narratively for me, maybe. But I think gameplay wise, my favorite is the sneaky bunker level where you need to break out of your cell and sneak around. When you're playing that on a higher difficulty level, it's just wild. I mean, you can't make any noise. You have to slap people. You have to use the throwing knives. It's very unforgiving to any kind of noise. And I love that the game offers us these like run and gun macho levels, but also these very sneaky, quieter, strategic levels where I probably played it like 36 times just trying to figure out, okay, if I get my gun first with the silencer, can I, but I have to be too loud to get that. So where should I? It's just a very fun, like cognitive puzzle added onto your kind of twitch reflex skills.
Yeah. And that's one that you can get overwhelmed in pretty quickly because they just kind of keep spawning out of, I guess.
They keep coming.
Yeah, they just keep coming, right? So regardless of what difficulty you're on, you could be mowing down enemies if you make too much noise, like you said, for days if you survive.
Yes. Right. You can't think for 1 minute that you can just kill all the bad guys and keep going. They will keep coming, and so I love that. What are y'all's favorite levels?
And that's another one with the camera and stuff as well, right? We have to take the cameras out and everything. So
right.
I really like that level.
I mean, that's a good one. Yeah.
I think that's one that I definitely remember replaying a bunch. I don't know why that was the one that I went back to, but I wouldn't be surprised if as a kid, as someone who's, 10 years old or 12 years old, that's the one I'd go back to because the enemies kept spawning, because I could put in the cheats and I could have a bunch of mines everywhere, have 12 of them all in like a staircase and just see the explosions go nuts. Like I think that's probably why that was one of them. And then I do remember playing the train quite a bit. I remember playing that a decent amount. I really appreciated this time Surface. Surface is the one where
that's
you're in this. It's pretty open. It's not that long of a level, but it's open. You're in the snow. As far as I remember rewatching the movie, that is not something that happens. It's one of the additional sort of stages, or at least an expansion of the movie. And it felt ahead of its time when I'm sitting there playing this again for the first time in probably 17 years or something. I was like, oh, they, talking about the fog of war and all those types of things in Jungle. This was that, but in one sort of like large circular area. And you could kind of do things in any order you wanted. And, enemies kept spawning, but it never felt like you were in a tunnel. You were literally out in the open, and like all that stuff was a lot of fun. So I think that's the one that stood out to me. And also it gave me a good chance to use a sniper. And I always love sniping in games. So,
yes.
Oh
yes.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I personally, first off, I love Dam. Like the Dam is it's so much fun. It's iconic. It's got so much going for it. And I hate to be a one note song, because often when I think of games, like the first levels tend to be my favorite. And I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a me thing, or if that's like me just thinking like, wow, this is when they were fresh. This is when they were like, this is the idea. Let's hit it hard. And they go, because there's so many elements in Dam that you can go through. Like they have the alarm system. It's like disable the alarms. There's the whole like shoot the lock to get through the thing, like you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
And
it feels very spy-like.
Yeah, and it feels giant. And there's even the extra mission that you put the modem in the in the thing, in the PC or whatever. But it's like there's so much going on. And there's like it's the level that really made me feel like a spy rather than run and gun kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate. And plus it's also got that dope cutscene at the end when you bungee off the dam, which is awesome.
So great.
It's cool
it's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna finish. I also like Streets because you can hop in a tank, and I wanted to bring that one up because I watched the movie, like I rewatched the movie just for this.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
I gotta watch the movie because I haven't seen it since I was a kid or since I was really young. And then he gets in the tank and goes, and I'm like, yeah, I forgot about that. And then I'm playing the game. I got to that level, and I was like, I got to get in the tank. I was like, I don't even like, you don't even need to get in the tank. I was like, whoa.
Right. Yes. It's such a great level. The guys were joking with me that they feel kind of embarrassed of that level because it was a little thrown together at the last minute. And they're very conscious of the fact that like the way the graphics work in the first person perspective, like Bond becomes a tank.
Yeah.
Like it's you continue to be Bond, but your weapon is a tank. And I love that. I love that. But it's funny that you mentioned that
be the tank, you know?
Yeah. Like you are the tank. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned you like those early games because it's while they still had the idea, but what's really funny is like in both Mario 3 and in Goldeneye, the first levels were the ones they designed last because they wanted to leave them for last. So they could make sure that they were introducing all the mechanics at the beginning of the game the way they wanted to. And I just love that because it's something it's advice I give my students all the time. Like write your introduction to your paper last once you know what you want to introduce, you know?
It completely makes sense because at that point, I mean, especially with the way, like we talked about, the way things changed so much in that last year leading up to release, especially with a game like this or with games at that time. Absolutely. Because now you know the basis of the rest of the game, or at least you know the vast majority potentially and all that. And it's fun that, you know, that level is great because just like a lot of stages in this, because I after I read the book and after I played the game, I watched the movie. And I just wanted to compare notes on that. Yeah. And same thing, I haven't watched it in years. It's been, I don't even know how long, probably even longer than since I've played the game. And I just love the expansion of what they did because it's sort of like, I wrote this down because it reminds me of, I have some friends and Mike, I'm sure you're listening. I disagree with you, but I'm going to call you out just a little bit. You know, there's talk that, you know, like Rogue One in Star Wars is sort of an expansion on one sentence that saying like, oh, these are the secret plans. And that's it, right? You don't need to know that story. Right. I disagree with that completely. I think it's a great movie. I think the story of itself, of the plans and how it all works is interesting. Even if it wasn't in that movie, even if it was in a novel or whatever. That's just my opinion on it. Doesn't have to be everybody's, obviously.
Is your friend saying that he doesn't like Rogue One? Because that's a great movie.
I think
agree
he's
with your friend. For exactly the reason I totally respect that it is a really good movie. It's just not a movie I enjoy, but it's because I think if you love Star Wars, some people are really more drawn to like the lightsabery stuff, and some people are more drawn to like the Han Solo-y stuff. And I'm just more of a lightsaber. Like, I want to see people using the Force. I want to see lightsaber duels. Like, I'm not as into like the espionage. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Andor. So that's the only reason.
It's
like,
funny you say that, because I feel like it gave us one of the most badass Darth Vader scenes in a movie.
It did.
Like,
I think
that's
it
true.
did. Yeah.
It was pretty
It does
awesome.
have a very badass Darth Vader scene.
So,
yeah,
exactly.
That's no
and the reason why I bring that up is because, yes, that's a much larger expansion of a singular idea for sure. But when you start a movie with a guy jumping off a dam, yes, you suspect that it's James Bond, but the fact that they show you how he gets there and you are him getting to that point, like you spend, let's say 20 minutes, half an hour, if you're messing around, whatever it might be, like, or speed running it and just using one bullet, you're James Bond in that moment. And then you begin the movie. And I love that that's how they started. They could easily, you are holding the gun. They could have easily started this with the ending of that stage of Dam jumping off of the dam. Could have just been the start of the game, and it would have been totally fine. It would have been great. But they created a game that, like you said, introduces a bunch of mechanics, alarms, sneaking. Going behind the truck, I think is such a fun way to start things.
Fun.
Yeah.
And
you're
totally right. I
like
mean, it feels like almost like a prequel, like they're immersing you into his, because those opening James Bond action sequences before the plot of the movie actually starts are such a wonderful tradition of the genre and of the series. And my grandfather's favorite thing to say is, after that opening huge action sequence that they have in every movie, he always will turn to you and go, "It could happen." And that's our tradition, and then the movie starts, right? Like after the big music credit scene. But it's fun that you get to participate in that in the game for sure.
Those are little additions. So we talked about favorite stages or favorite ones that we remember and stuff. Any guns in particular that are your favorite?
I mean, I love the laser. Because I'm kind of a sci-fi fan, and so I thought that was a really fun thing to do in that little bonus level to have the laser.
That's up there for
satisfying.
Sure. Yeah.
The RCP-90. The RCP-90 is really fun.
So that's the one that always stood out to me as a kid, for sure. So when I finally picked it up in the game, I was like, yes, I got it. And it's fun. It just shoots super fast. And it's really cool. But exciting. But I actually found this time that maybe because it's very all around, it's strong, whatever. Maybe it's just overpowered. I don't know. But the assault rifle is kind of that. I found that to be very effective because you do have you have a zoom on it and everything. So in single player, at least it was really good. Multiplayer, I feel like even the Clob was good, even though it's like, a spray machine. But
legendarily bad.
Yeah, exactly. Jiggy, what about you?
Am I the only one that loves the original, like just the PPK? Because
no, not at all.
Oh yeah, PPK
honestly, like I found myself playing through levels, and when you start with that, I would often just keep using it because you get up, it's especially with the silencer on it. You go up, you're like, pew pew.
It's incredible.
Pew.
Yeah.
Pew pew.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Not only the sound effect, but it's also like it's pretty powerful. Like it only takes a few hits to down pretty much any enemy. I mean, it's not ideal for every situation, but I found myself using it more than I thought I would. Like a base weapon, like you never stick with the standard, but I was like, this is a pretty good standard.
It's a good go-to. It's a good thing to always have. And I love, actually, that reminds me, two things just reminded me of what we're talking about with the guns is with the pistol, I love the sound effect of the silencer of that and the sniper and stuff. They did such a good job with that. And then I think in the movie, I realized some of the sound effects in the game they took from the movie. So like when some of the bullets are hitting off the wall and stuff, like the ricochet of the bullets, those sound effects are in the movie. And I'm like, oh my God, I thought that was just a game thing. This is amazing. So that little things like that were really like fun touches because I guess they kind of had some time in order to implement those things. But those little touches I thought were great. And then because I mentioned the Clob, I know, Alyse, we should talk about that a little bit, because
Yeah.
the Clob was something that has like a little bit of a story to it, because like you said, it's like infamously
Yeah.
weak, but that was the thing that the team
Right.
knew about. Like that's what.
They did. Yeah, they did that to us on purpose for sure. They just thought it was really fun to have a big range of weapons, right? They
Yeah.
they kind of modeled this after Doom, but we're able to talk about all these guns we love now because they all have their own sort of feel and personality, and
Mhm.
those differences are created by, of course, how the gun looks and sounds, but also the sort of rate of fire, the speed of reload, the accuracy, the amount of damage inflicted by each bullet. And so those created a really unique feel for each gun. And so they
Mhm.
did want to have a gun that kind of was a little bit wild and sprayed everywhere and was a little bit, Duncan Botwood describes the Club as chattery, and just having like a
Oh
lot of
yeah, I read
personality.
that and I was like,
Yeah,
I've seen that in other places too, before this, and
yeah,
I was like, that's what it sounds like the plastic chattering teeth, wind up teeth thing when you
yes,
shoot
Yeah.
it. That's what it
yeah,
sounds
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
yeah. And it kind of feels like cheap or something, like lightweight, and it might just be because it's so inaccurate and it inflicts so little damage, but they always do point out that on licensed kill mode, one hit kill mode, it's the best weapon because it's got such a wide spread, and so it's the amount of damage inflicted doesn't matter at all.
Right.
But yeah, I think that the thing to keep in mind about the guys making this game is they were British guys who had never been around weapons before. None of them had ever fired a gun. So they
Mhm.
had a big picture book called Firearms of the World. And they were just looking for the guns that looked cool. They were really inspired by the movie Heat and John Woo
Mm.
action movies. And they wanted the guns that were in those movies. Of course, the weapons that were in Goldeneye, the movie, they included. And so yeah, they were just kind of going off what they thought looked cool and sounded cool. And when they ended up making the Clob, they needed to give all these games, all these guns, alternate names because
Right.
the Nintendo legal people were concerned about copyright infringement on real gun names. So they named the Clob. The Clob was modeled after a gun called the Scorpion, and changed the name to the Spider. And then after 800,000 instruction manuals were printed with the name Spider as the Clob in them, they found out that Spider is the name of a paintball gun. And so they had to change it again. And this time they decided to name it Clob after Ken Lobb, the Nintendo of America employee who had really gone to bat for the game and really kind of pushed for them to be allowed to include the multiplayer at the last minute. And now all the guys feel sort of guilty that they named this terrible weapon after Ken Lobb, but he's super happy. He's like, no, I love this. It's great. They kind of joke like, or Ken Lobb will say, yeah, it's really loud and wildly inaccurate. That's me. Yeah, he's a
Hey,
good sport about it.
Yeah.
that's great. I mean, it just sounds like all these guys are just having so much fun. You know, like you
So
mentioned
much.
before, it's amazing how like the fun that they had and the camaraderie that they had and all
Yeah.
that stuff. It shows in the final product. I mean, like this is just like such a monumental game, because
Yeah.
yes, there were first person shooters available before this, but unless you had a PC, which some people
Right.
did, and unless you had one that could run Doom, or unless you were allowed to own Doom
Yeah.
as a kid,
Good point.
like yeah, right. I never owned it. It was always at a friend's place, and
Right.
I don't know. I feel like
Yeah.
it was shareware and stuff, right? So it's easy to get a hold of, but I also
Right.
never had internet until I was in high school. Like all that kind of stuff was
Yeah.
just not available to me, and yet this is what stands out as that. Like Doom is obviously iconic. Castlevania, Wolfenstein is obviously those games are there, but there's something about this game that is just ingrained in gaming and just
Yeah.
culture in general. And
Yeah.
it's insane. It's just insane that these guys did this
Yeah.
in with such a small team in like a tight
Yeah.
space.
I'm just gonna throw this out there
Yeah.
because we were talking about how much fun they must have been having and stuff. So the book has pictures, and you
Yes.
get
Yes.
those pictures of, like, I'm looking at Martin Hollis right now. Convinced
Yeah.
David, is it Doak? David Doak. Sorry,
Yeah.
my font's small. I need glasses. But you just look at the pictures and they're sitting there, they're smoking a cigarette, long ponytail, like,
Yeah.
drinks. If you look at the table, there's just
Yeah.
drinks everywhere. And it's like,
Yeah.
they were having
They
a good
partied hard.
time. Like, yeah.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. They have all kinds of stories about sneaking off campus because you weren't allowed to smoke at Rare, so they would sneak
Right.
across the street to a little church backyard or something, and they yeah, they were just so young, and honestly, they were quite close to people my students' age now, and I teach people who are trying to create their own art, and so I
Yeah.
found it to be a really inspiring reminder that if you're making something and you are genuinely enjoying it, you are having fun, you are being true to yourself, you are being honest, and it's moving to you, then it will be meaningful to someone else. We get so focused on like imagining what our readers or our viewers or our listeners, I guess in y'all's case, want. But then at the end of the day, like you are your own first audience. And I think those guys, like you described it, with how much fun they were having, really stayed true to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a fun time. I was worried it was going to be. I mean, maybe it's using the Xbox controller, and it sort of like ended up working out for me a little bit more. I still felt totally fine playing it with the 64 controller. It didn't bother me at all. But like, there's enough chatter online. It's very easy to be cynical, very easy to be like, mean on the internet behind a username and stuff. So there's like chatter there that spreads. That's like, oh, this game doesn't hold up, and oh, it's trash now and whatever. And I just do not agree, especially after revisiting it. Like, yeah, it feels like it was made when it was, but that's not a bad thing. That is a positive in my mind.
Totally. I mean, it's like when you see a picture of like your grandfather when he was like old and kind of hot and kind of like good looking, and like you're like, oh, you must have gotten all the girls. And like, if you could go back in time and like throw down with him, he could throw down, and now he's he's older, but he throws down in a different way. And he's got kind of bad knees, and maybe he can't always remember things. It's like, yeah, this game shows its age for sure. That's not, there's no debate there. It's not as perennially great as Super Mario 3, I don't think, but it still throws down now. And for its time, it really, really threw down and was incredibly new and innovative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's like, so that's my cat. She just, full disclosure, my cat just scared the crap out of me because she just like jumped. She jumped. I had the door closed. She jumped on the door and like threw it open, and I like reacted. So if anybody sees a video of this, they're gonna see me like react at some point.
Amazing.
But anyways, so my YouTube channel, I actually started because I saw a video about someone bashing Donkey Kong 64, and I was like, I love Donkey Kong 64. And I started my YouTube channel. I was like, I love it. Here's why. And I made a video about it. And so like, I'm so like, people online say they don't like a game. I'm like, that makes me like it more at this point.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why.
I'll show you.
Seriously.
No, there's so many
reasons
to
like a game, and one of those is that the game's really good, but it's not necessarily always the case that that's why we like something. I mean, it could be nostalgia, it could be that it hit you in the feels just because of who you are or because of where you were at with your life or whatever. But yeah, we shouldn't be trying to yuck anyone's yum. I'm big on that.
Yeah, absolutely, and
like that.
And just to wrap up with just how many copies were out there of this game. I believe this is worldwide, but it is the third best-selling game on the console. Yes, it was bundled with some consoles, but as we know, you didn't have to get it then in order to get this game.
Right.
8,090,000 copies, according to the So yeah. A little Austin Powers, which by the way, we haven't brought up Austin Powers, but I could not help think of Austin Powers.
He told me he was going to bring it up. That was me segueing for him. I set it up this man.
Yeah, Austin Powers was one of those movies that I watched a little bit too early, or at least the first one anyway. But was constantly on. I mean, really, as a 12, 13-year-old, I probably shouldn't have watched the first one, but it was like always on, so, especially the second one. But it's funny because they're not fantastic movies. They're just goofy or whatever. But watching Goldeneye again, playing through it, and all like just small things, small hints here and there. I was like, oh, that's Austin Powers, or I knew it was riffing on James Bond at the time. but I didn't
Yeah.
really understand what they were riffing on. And it's just, this is one of those movies,
know.
because the movie was so big, it's easy for Mike Myers to have to go and grab from a movie like this, not just, the Sean
Right.
Connery days, for example, and stuff. So,
Yeah, I don't know about
I
y'all, but
just,
I'm definitely one of those millennials that played the game before I saw the movie. In fact, I don't think I'd ever seen a
Yes.
James Bond movie before playing this game. It introduced me to the entire
Yes.
franchise. And so one of the arguments I make in the book is that Goldeneye, the game, I think played a major role in saving the Bond franchise. And then, in terms of like your show at large, I think Goldeneye played a really significant role in saving the N64 and therefore saving Nintendo. And I know that's a huge claim, and I know that it's not 100% accurate, but we have to make fun, big claims. But yeah, I think the Nintendo 64 would have totally flopped if it weren't for Goldeneye. We know that from sales numbers. And just from the way people were writing about it online, like I guess I have to get an N64 now so that I can play this game. And without the N60, I mean, the N64 just kind of scraped by, and that's how Nintendo lived to fight another day with the GameCube.
Yeah, no kidding. But it's true, like that. It's yes, there were other games in development at this time, and yes, there were things that came out in 98, 99, 2000, or whatever. But I don't know that like late 99, mid 2000, like those last couple of years of the console really would have happened unless you have this. Because even just looking at the top like sales charts quickly, if GoldenEye was out in 97, the closest one that has high sales is Diddy Kong Racing in 97 and Star Fox 64, which came out just before. Everything else is Mario Kart, Super Mario, and then everything else is 98, 99, 2000.
Right.
So, a lot of those games, I'm sure Donkey Kong 64 was being, at least early stages at when this game was being made, but also rare. But maybe they wouldn't have been given the same leash, or maybe they wouldn't have had as much money or as big of a team, whatever.
Right. And Goldeneye was meant to reach a different audience than folks who would have been playing Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Tooie. Of course, Conker and Goldeneye were kind of in this adult gaming category, and we're really still trying to fight that console war that they had kind of started losing to Sonic and this edgier, more grown-up vibe. And so they were really experimenting with it. I think they obviously came back full circle, and now they're still your cartoon, family-friendly company. But the 90s and aughts are a really interesting time for Nintendo experimenting with more adult themes and more grittier, less family-friendly games. And so I find it a super interesting time in their history.
And your claim about GoldenEye saving the 64, I mean, like you could make an argument for the game, but you can't make an. Am I saying
can't
this right?
argue?
You can't. Yes, you can make an argument for the game, but you can't argue with the fact that Rare definitely saved the N64 with their library.
Yes.
So, and that GoldenEye, and that really kind of catalyzed everything, because like even Donkey Kong 64 had influences from GoldenEye. That's why Donkey Kong had the gun. Like
that's a really great point.
I'd talk about that.
Really great point.
I mean, there were so many good ideas rolling around in that, in that campus or in that workplace or whatever, right? And they just sort of, I think Donkey Kong 64 is a perfect example of how they meshed a lot of their ideas together. And
a lot of it worked together, but some,
as we've discussed in a previous episode, some of it works really well, and some of it just feels like too much. But there's something about GoldenEye where it has like this perfect balance, and and that's honestly the perfect balance could even just be, like you said, I think towards the beginning of our recording, of how like multiplayer was sort of, they were told like don't do it, and they still did. But all of this stuff we're saying, I think, could be true if multiplayer wasn't in this game. So add that on top of it, which is what a lot of people remember, because it gets you together at that age. Perfect age to get together, perfect console, the first one with 4 controllers, like all these things that came together. It has this perfect middle ground. And and if someone hasn't played it, they're scared about the way it controls on like the Switch, for example, or if you have Game Pass, I still think you absolutely should play it, even if you're not playing multiplayer.
Agreed. Yeah, I do think that it's a fun one to play now, and it also is so important for like a very specific generation of humans, because of exactly what you said. Those of us who had grown up with Mario on the NES or Super NES, or played on the Genesis, then we're starting to want a little something a little bit more mature. Then we got this game, and it's kind of feels like the console grew up with us, in a really fun way.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Alyse, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for taking the
thank
time.
you.
No.
Thank you all. This was so much fun. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and I've learned so much, and I've just really enjoyed getting to think through all of this with y'all.
Oh, of course. And
Cool.
you know what? Not only thanks for taking the time, but thanks for writing like a book and books like this, because I honestly I think that they are valuable resources for people that are either don't know the history of games like this, or Super Mario Brothers 3, or any of the other boss fight books games. Like, there's a lot to dig into, and
there's a lot on N64 titles, so
yes,
there's if you're an N64 fan, there's plenty to read from Boss Fight.
Yeah, exactly. And they have physical and digital copies of stuff, which is great.
Yeah.
I just, thanks for taking the time to talk with us and in our goofy little nerdy 64 show here.
And I will say,
all day.
I will say that your book is very well written. I don't know that we said that, so it's very well written.
Thanks so much.
I was trapped in an airport the other day, like last weekend,
Oh,
and
no.
I passed the time by reading your book. So
I'm honored.
Awesome.
Thank you for spending your time that way.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I was like, I gotta read this. I was like, this is perfect timing. And then I pulled it up, and then I was just like,
I hope it helped you feel like you were escaping a little. Like,
yeah. Oh, I love it. I love diving into the history of Rare. Like, that to me was like, that was so cool. I love the history of it. That was just awesome, because obviously Rare's a big part of my life.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And the shirt.
Yeah.
And the shirt,
and the Conquer shirt. And so, it was awesome. It was great. I wanted to bring up two things before we end this. And the first is, have you guys seen the ROM of Goldeneye with Mario characters?
Oh, yes. I don't know that
Mario.
I feel like,
it's pretty funny. Like,
it's amazing. Yeah.
Like, Koopas are enemies. You've got like Natalia is Peach, Daisy is Xenia, and Luigi is Trevlin. And like they like changed the dialogue and things. So like Luigi, I wrote this down because I was like, it was pretty funny. He's like running away from Mario, and he's like, "Finish the job, Mario, if you can."
I just love that the game has this continued life with people modding it, and there's some mods that are really fun.
God. So like, I just opened it up
to recreate like World War II areas, or give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God, this is? Oh, this is one of the scientists, and it's Yoshi.
Yeah, it's Yoshi
is embodying the scientist.
Yes, it's awesome.
Disable via security.
So it's something
so sweet.
Something for viewers to look up.
That's excellent. That's so funny. I never saw that before.
And you can play them. I mean, you can download all these. You can play them. You can, if you want more Goldeneye, like there's lots out there by really creative people, and they're hard. Some of the levels are very hard and super engaging.
Yeah, it's super cool. That's the cool thing about 64 right now. Just all the mod scene creating. I just love that people can put these and actually have them run on physical hardware. It's not just not emulation.
Yes.
It's you put it on a cartridge, you can put it in your 64 and you can play the game.
Yeah.
And I just absolutely adore that. There's tons of banjo modding. That modding scene is huge. Goldeneye, it's like a lot of Rare stuff, which is just so cool to me. And then the other thing I just wanted to bring up, because I told Dave I would, Famke Janssen, she's hot. So
yes. And she actually she's Xenia, right?
Yeah.
So she like lived up to her name, because I don't know if I was able to put this in the book or not, but during filming, so for anyone who's not familiar with the movie, like she's named Xenia on the top, and then she does kill a man by straddling him during sex and strangling him to death with her thighs. So incredible, classic Bond girl. But the actress sent a stunt guy to the hospital during filming. She really hurt him. Yes, yeah, she actually really did hurt him. So she's fierce and she's amazing. And
Yeah.
the '90s were I touch on this a little bit in the book, but the '90s were a super interesting time for gender in the Bond movies
Hmm.
because they were like really concerned. Like, are people too PC now? Will they not like that we have these blonde, these Bond girls? So
Right.
they tried to emphasize that they have a computer programming Bond girl, doing this kind of traditionally male role, and she's super smart. And then you
Hmm.
have Xenia, who's super badass.
Yeah.
So
They gave
they're
him
trying to
more
pitch this,
purpose. More purpose. Right.
They
Like,
did, and what's funny though is like they even have M in the movie say Judi Dench
Yes.
say to Bond, you're a misogynist dinosaur.
yeah.
But then you've got Pierce Brosnan on the publicity tour for the movie was saying the most horrible things. He was like, "Yeah, he's a chauvinist and he's proud of it. And if a girl gives him any lip, he's gonna slap her around." And you're like, "Oh my god!" You have to imagine the movie
No.
executives who were like, "Pierce, shut up! Like, not the vibe we're going for."
Ooh, okay.
Yeah,
They couldn't control him. He just was saying whatever he wanted.
You know what? Maybe he just he didn't know what else was said in the movie. So he's like, oh yeah, no, I'm basically Sean Connery. This is basically 78. Like for sure. I can say whatever I want.
Yeah.
It does sound very Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Very
Well, that's,
Sean
Nobody,
Connery.
like-
it seems like that's what he was playing when he was doing publicity. It's like, dude, that's not what's happening here.
Right, that's not the vibe at all in the movies. And he just, I don't know what got into him, but it's very funny.
And that's like one of the first things that is said to him by M2, right? She's just like, I don't want to hear your misogynistic excuses or something like that. It's like right there. And of course it's her too. Like Judi Dench just saying anything like that to someone is like,
first
hell
female
yeah.
M. I mean,
love it.
it's a very cool. Yeah, it's hard to remember that when that movie came out, it had been a long gap between the last Bond movie and the next. They were worried about the franchise. They were worried that like, hey, the Soviet Union's kind of over. Is our franchise even relevant? Who's he going to fight? Who's now there are computers, there's cyber attacks. What are we going to do? So Goldeneye represents a big transition, not just for gaming, but also for the film industry and film narratives as well.
Yeah, that franchise took, and like you said, I think the combo, like, the game came out just what, year and a half roughly after the movie, which usually doesn't happen. We know that that's part of development and the console and like all these types of things, but like, they perfected a lot of things, and between the movie doing really well and then just enough I feel like it's just enough time because movies had so much life on VHS and stuff at the time that like just when you stopped maybe pressing play on the VHS 17 times a week, the game came out and then you were ready to play the game. And it just sort of like somehow that year and a half, whatever, 18 months, whatever it was, just extended the life of everybody loving James Bond. And the game, like you said, I think played that part for not only the console and Nintendo, but I think, for the franchise too, for sure. It's just one of those titles. So, once again, Alyse, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank y'all. I really appreciate your
so much
time.
fun.
Thank you.
We will hopefully be able to touch base soon. And anytime you want to talk another crazy N64 game, let us know. We know where to find us.
Anytime. Count me in. I love all those
Amazing.
games.